there has been a lot of chat on my Facebook page about the term hatch rates as it pertains to our incubation practices. What I found, okay, so when I talk about hatch rates, I'm talking like simply about the eggs that are hatching from the incubator that we're incubating. And I was under the impression that everybody calculated like me from the very beginning of hatch. So I put 12 eggs into the incubator and 10 of those eggs hatched. And so I have what, like a 85%, I don't know, whatever number hatch rate that is. But what I found out is that people are measuring their hatch rates from different points in the incubation process. And let me be honest, when I first heard this, my first instinct was a little judgy of those of y'all measuring your hatch rate from different points in the incubation process, because we're talking, whereas I calculate from the total number of eggs that I put into the incubator, what hatches from the total number of eggs put into the incubator, and I consider that to be my hatch rate. Some of you are calculating from the amount of eggs that are viable, meaning the amount of eggs that are developing. You're counting those from that number. 12 eggs in the incubator, 10 are developing. So out of those 10, 8 hatch, and you're calculating that, the 10 to 8 as your hatch rate. Some of you are calculating from the amount of eggs that you put into lockdown being your hatch rates. I'm not gonna lie, I did get a little judgy for a minute because I was like, oh my God, depending on when we're calculating those rates, like our numbers are like, that seems really dishonest. But then somebody commented on one of my posts the other night and she gave a very reasonable explanation for why she doesn't count her hatch rate from her starting point, from all the eggs that she started with. Okay, so what she explained is that she counts fertilization rates. So fertilization meaning you don't even really need to incubate to check fertilization. This is something that I personally will do pretty regularly, every couple weeks at least if I'm not hatching, where I just crack open it. There are only 2 ways to test for fertilization. You can either crack open an egg and look for a bullseye in that egg, and that will mean that the egg has been fertilized by the rooster. Of course, you can't incubate those eggs. Or you can incubate, and the eggs that begin to develop, even no matter how far they get, are fertilized. So you'll see veining in those eggs, and hopefully you'll see chicks develop, and those are your fertilized eggs. So she counts like from the beginning of the incubation process, you can count for fertilization, but then for her hatch rates, she's only counting from the eggs that are fertilized, because in her mindset, the eggs that aren't fertilized were never gonna hatch to begin with. So really there's 2 parts to this. There are what are your fertilization rates, and then there are what are the hatch rates, meaning from the fertilized eggs, how many of those eggs will hatch, because there's a lot that can happen, as we all know, in incubation processes, having to do with different methods of incubation, different incubators, whether the eggs were shipped or collected, like so many things. Like, it actually really makes sense to me to have your fertilization counts versus your hatch rates, meaning how many eggs hatch from those fertilized eggs, because you can actually tell a lot about lines, health, and vigor, and so on from that point. So I don't know, this theory really, I get it. It really does make sense to me. And I think what needs to happen is when we're asking questions, we need to be more mindful about the questions that we're asking. So for example, I don't really talk about hatch rates. I usually talk about fertilization. I feel like this is another topic that's kind of similar to like olive egger generations and olive egger breeding, where we kind of just all have a little like our own little ways of doing things. But it would be nice if we could get on the same page, because it would be easier for everybody to understand each other.